It is 4 p.m., and your brain is utterly fried from endless corporate emails, crushing deadlines, and cumulative weeks of sleep deprivation. To survive the final hours of the shift, you reach for a sugary glazed donut and a cold energy drink, seeking a quick survival spark. Yet, deep inside your cardiovascular plumbing, an invisible, highly destructive war is quietly brewing, completely hidden from standard medical checkups. According to extensive data published by the American Heart Association, nearly 50% of sudden heart attack patients possess completely normal LDL cholesterol levels. This staggering medical statistic forces a vital question. If the raw number itself isn't a guaranteed killer, what is actually causing the damage? The answer lies not in how much cholesterol you have floating around, but in how that cholesterol is treated by its surrounding environment. Your liver produces about 80% of it daily, wrapping it inside specialized protective protein boats called lipoproteins to travel safely through blood. Think of these protein vehicles like cargo ships. Standard blood tests merely weigh the total weight of the cargo inside the ships together. But lipidology research from Johns Hopkins demonstrates that the total cargo weight is an outdated marker that misses the underlying hazard completely. What truly matters is the specific particle size and count. On one hand, you have large, buoyant LDL particles resembling big fluffy beach balls. These massive fluffy particles are too large to penetrate your arterial walls, meaning they float past harmlessly without ever causing blockages or risk. On the other hand, you have small, dense LDL particles. These resemble tiny, hard, dense golf balls moving in massive, aggressive numbers. Because they are so incredibly minute, they easily slip right through the microscopic tears in your blood vessel walls, initiating dangerous plaque buildup. To understand why these small, dense particles bypass conventional lipid panels, we must look at how modern cardiology measures actual arterial risk. Dr. Sarah emphasizes that a standard cholesterol panel can completely blindside patients, masking a highly progressive, dangerous vascular disease underneath. Clinical guidelines from the European Society of Cardiology indicate that counting total cargo weight ignores the exact number of physical ships. If you have 10 heavy cargo ships versus 100 tiny, nimble pirate boats, which scenario presents a greater threat to a harbor wall? This critical scientific realization introduces the single most accurate test for tracking vascular plaque risk: Apolipoprotein B, or simply ApoB. Every single plaque-causing lipoprotein particle in your body possesses exactly one molecular passport attached to its outer shell, known as ApoB. By measuring ApoB, doctors do not guess the weight of the floating cargo. They count every single dangerous particle with absolute precision. The Journal of the American College of Cardiology confirms that ApoB is a vastly superior predictor of vascular disease compared to traditional LDL. But there is an even more sinister, hidden card in the deck that standard blood screenings completely overlook: lipoprotein A, commonly abbreviated as Lp(a). This particle is essentially a standard LDL particle that has been genetically modified with a deadly structural addition. It possesses a specialized sticky protein tail called Apolipoprotein A, which acts like a physical Velcro strip inside your delicate blood vessel lining. Once an LP, a particle sticks to a microscopic tear, it is virtually impossible for your body to dislodge it, accelerating blockages instantly. Data tracks show 1 in 5 people inherit high levels of this dangerous genetic marker from birth, completely independent of their daily fitness routine. This means 20% of the global population is walking around with a ticking heart bomb, entirely unaware because basic panels miss it. But numbers alone do not build plaques. The real disaster strikes when everyday lifestyle elements actively weaponize these floating particles, starting with sugar. Remember that glazed donut and sweet energy drink Alex consumed at his office desk to power through the afternoon slump? Within minutes of consumption, those refined carbohydrates break down, sending an absolute tidal wave of simple glucose molecules flooding directly into his blood. This massive influx creates a severe spike in blood sugar. Under a microscope, this glucose overabundance transforms the fluid highway into an aggressive environment. According to data from Harvard Medical School, chronic blood glucose elevations act exactly like microscopic shards of glass tearing up your arterial wallpaper. This delicate protective interior lining is the endothelium. When scraped repeatedly by sugar, its smooth surface becomes heavily inflamed, rough, and defensive. Without nitric oxide, the physical pipe loses its natural elasticity. It stiffens, undergoes early endothelial dysfunction, and becomes highly prone to tracking injuries. But sugar does not just tear up the vessel walls from the outside. It initiates an even deeper chemical horror story known as glycation. Glycation occurs when floating sugar molecules slam directly into passing fluffy white cholesterol particles, bonding to them without any regulating enzyme permission. This raw chemical reaction caramelizes the outer shell of the cholesterol vehicle, turning a previously healthy particle into a sticky, deformed abomination. In clinical lipidology, these permanently damaged, caramelized structures are classified as advanced glycation end products, appropriately abbreviated as AGEs. Data from Johns Hopkins Medicine shows that once a cholesterol particle is glycated into an AGE, it becomes entirely unrecognizable to your liver. Ordinarily, your liver safely clears old cholesterol out of circulation within 2 days. But glycated AGE particles are permanently denied re-entry, forcing them to circulate endlessly. Because their caramelized outer coats are sticky, these rogue particles easily snag onto the rough, glass-torn endothelial microfissures created by the glucose spikes. They sink directly beneath the delicate surface layer, trapping themselves inside the vessel wall tissue, forming the literal baseline foundation of lethal arterial plaque. With the baseline foundation of arterial plaque now firmly anchored beneath the tissue surface, the danger rapidly multiplies through secondary metabolic reactions. As Alex finishes his high-sugar afternoon snack, his pancreas responds to the massive glucose influx by launching an aggressive countermeasure. Data from the National Institutes of Health tracks how consecutive simple carbohydrate meals force insulin into a prolonged chronic elevation state. While insulin successfully clears glucose out of the open current, its continuous high presence acts like an architectural roadblock for arterial defense. This biological process is responsible for constantly identifying, breaking down, and sweeping away trapped waste, early lipids, and caramelized AGE particles. However, advanced cell metabolism trials reveal that high insulin levels acts as a direct molecular off-switch for this entire cleanup operation. With the cleanup crews entirely blocked, the trapped, caramelized cholesterol begins to putrefy and ferment underneath your delicate vessel lining. This hidden cellular decay triggers the expression of vascular cell adhesion molecules, scientifically documented in cardiology journals as VCAM1. VCAM1 molecules act like hundreds of microscopic, sticky biological grappling hooks sprouting directly out of your smooth arterial walls. These sticky grappling hooks wave continuously inside the fast-moving blood current, waiting to snare passing components and launch an immune response. The structural damage inside the pipe is now complete. Sugar has stripped away the artery's protective shield, turning it into a literal adhesive trap. Alex's phone rings violently with another urgent demand, instantly shattering his brief sugar high and sending his nervous system into overdrive. His brain perceives this psychological threat exactly like an encounter with an ancient predator, firing immediate signals down to his adrenal glands. This neural trigger unleashes the primary commander of the body's survival reaction, a massive wave of the spiky stress hormone, cortisol. To uncover why this occurs, we must trace how cortisol physically alters the cardiovascular framework, acting like a structural siege command. Cortisol binds directly to specialized cellular receptors lining the smooth muscle tissue wrapped tightly around your blood vessel pipelines. This molecular connection forces the surrounding smooth muscular wall to clamp down, initiating a severe physical process called vasoconstriction. But when Alex stays stressed for weeks over office paperwork, this temporary spike transforms into a permanent state of high fluid pressure. Inside the constricted pipe channels, your heart is forced to pump with immense, exhausting physical strain to shove fluid down the narrowed space. This elevated fluid velocity creates an intensely destructive physical friction forces known as high shear stress against the delicate inner artery walls. Like a high-pressure fire hose blasting the interior wallpaper of a room, this intense fluid friction rips open new microscopic tears across the endothelium. These fresh structural gaps create perfect, open invitations for circulating small, dense LDL particles to slide right out of the central stream. They sink deep beneath the surface layer, joining the caramelized sugar waste, dramatically accelerating the structural accumulation of advanced plaque blockages. While structural vessel tearing physical mechanisms accelerate local trap formations, chronic stress hormones strike a second biochemical blow elsewhere. Alex remains completely trapped at his workspace cubicle, typing frantically while his body swims inside a silent pool of stress chemicals. The continuous presence of spiky cortisol hormone units now travels downstream, navigating straight towards the body's primary metabolic processing factory. This means that psychological tension actively suppresses your liver's built-in vacuum system, causing floating lipids to accumulate rapidly regardless of exercise. Under normal metabolic conditions, your liver walls feature hundreds of small, welcoming dock doorways designated specifically to capture circulating cholesterol carriers. Passing fluffy white particles float up smoothly, slide perfectly into these matching molecular locks, and are cleanly recycled out of your blood current. But the cortisol siege entirely dismantles this elegant recycling loop. The angry orange stress hormones swarm the metabolic factory floor. They bind to regulatory genetic pathways, forcing the cell structures to physically collapse, slam shut, and dissolve the welcoming dock doorways. Cardiology registries track how this block triples the circulating lifespan of low-density lipoproteins, keeping them inside the bloodstream indefinitely. Because the exit doorways are dead, hundreds of healthy cholesterol particles are completely blocked from leaving, forced to bounce around in loops. The longer these particles circulate, the higher their exposure to highly reactive systemic waste materials constantly floating across the fluid current stream. These reactive elements collide with the lipid shell, stripping away electrons and initiating a highly destructive oxidation reaction loop. Beneath the subendothelial tissue layer, the chemical structural landscape undergoes a terrifying transformation as charred lipids gather in massive numbers. These oxidized low-density lipoproteins have completely lost their original soft structural form, leaking cytotoxic fluid into the local vascular matrix. Instead, your physical body registers these altered, oxidized lipid elements as a hostile foreign chemical invader, akin to toxic environmental poisons. This biological emergency activates a localized red alarm. Damaged tissue cells immediately begin secreting urgent distress signal chemical packages. Like miniature chemical flares fired from a battlefield, these distress cytokines shoot straight up into the fast-flowing bloodstream current pipeline. The systemic chemical alarm is instantly picked up by your body's patrolling immune security forces, the giant white blood cell monocytes. Recognizing the acute chemical coordinate markers, these defensive white blood cells alter their vector trajectory, locking onto the damaged vessel wall zone. As they arrive, the white blood cells connect perfectly with the sticky yellow VCM1 grappling hooks previously sprouted along the rough endothelium surface. This molecular capture initiates a complex physical migration process known as diapedesis, where the massive cells prepare to enter tissue layers. The security cell slips completely through the delicate endothelial border gate, descending directly into the deep subendothelial tissue vault below. Equipped with specialized cleaning enzymes, this newly deployed macrophage tank patrols the deep tissue layers, setting its sights directly on the toxic charred cholesterol layers. Gliding through the dark purple subendothelial matrix, the macrophage security tank deploys its scavenger receptors to lock onto the embedded invaders. Data from the National Institutes of Health tracks how these white blood cells are biologically hardwired to engulf oxidized lipids immediately. This automated defense process is phagocytosis. The macrophage swallows the chemical enemy whole, attempting to dissolve its toxic components. Cardiology studies confirm that oxidized lipids actively paralyze the macrophage's internal feedback mechanism, disabling its ability to stop eating. The white blood cell becomes a gluttonous monster, vacuuming up dozens, then hundreds of weaponized, crystallized cholesterol drops continuously. As it overeats, its clean white body stretches to its absolute physical limits, filling with bloated, yellow fat droplets called lipid vacuoles.
Pay close attention to this next point. The data clearly indicates that we must take immediate action to prevent further spread.
A foam cell is essentially a dead weight. It becomes completely paralyzed, losing its tiny mobile arms and anchoring itself permanently to the tissue floor. Worse, this cellular graveyard signals for reinforcement. Paralyzed foam cells secrete new cytokine flare lines, calling more white blood cells into the trap.
So the headaches have been happening almost every afternoon now.
I'm getting worried.
I understand. Based on your results, it seems like they are like...
As the foam cells die, they release their fatty storage packages, attracting circulating calcium deposits that harden the soft tissue matrix like cement. The physical pipe diameter shrinks. The growing subendothelial plaque bulge pushes upward, narrowing the open channel available for blood flow current transport. To understand why a heart attack strikes out of nowhere, we must look at the hidden architecture of the blockage itself. Beneath the surface lining sits a volatile core of dead foam cells, oxidized cholesterol waste, and cellular debris, a toxic hidden volcano. Sealing this toxic mass away from your active bloodstream stream is a structural protective cap made of smooth muscle cells and collagen fibers. Clinical registries compiled by the Mayo Clinic reveal a shocking paradox. Not all plaques pose an equal clinical emergency hazard risk. On one hand, you have old, calcified blockages. These possess a thick, sturdy fibrous cap reinforced heavily with dense rock-hard calcium cement deposits. While they can severely narrow the pipe diameter channel, their rigid, rock-hard framework makes them highly stable, sturdy, and extremely resistant to rupture. On the other hand, you have highly dangerous soft, inflamed plaques. These possess a thin, fragile fibrous cap barely holding back an angry lipid mass. Elevated blood glucose levels feed continuous inflammatory path reactions. Specialized white blood cells inside the core secrete corrosive matrix-degrading enzymes. Under the corrosive siege of MMP enzymes, the thin pink protective cap thins out drastically, becoming highly frayed, threadbare, and structurally unstable. Simultaneously, chronic cortisol elevations spike fluid rushing velocity, forcing high blood pressure waves to hammer relentlessly against this weakened threadbare wall segment. The fragile protective roof begins to fissure. Microscopic failure lines open up across the threadbare membrane layout framework under immense mechanical shear stress loads. To defuse this silent, ticking structural time bomb before an acute rupture event takes place, modern cardiology relies on advanced diagnostic tracking radar. An ECG tracks current electrical conductivity signals, which frequently show zero anomalies even when a pipe interior is severely degraded and structurally compromised. Instead, Advanced screening programs employ non-invasive structural radiology methods to map out physical arterial wall blockages directly with absolute clarity. Yet, Dr. Sarah explains in Critical Diagnostic Blind Spot, a standard calcium scan only tracks old hard cement. It cannot see the soft time bombs. By incorporating a specialized contrast fluid medium, a CCTA scan functions like an ultra-high resolution structural 3D mapping radar. It slices through bone structures to identify dangerous soft, non-calcified fatty deposits and measures the exact millimeter thickness of the fragile fibrous caps. Armed with his personal vascular imaging metrics, Alex sits down with Dr. Sarah to map out a comprehensive architectural defense strategy for his blood vessels. Dr. Sarah explains that reversing advanced vascular risk requires shifting focus entirely away from caloric deprivation toward intensive systemic inflammation control.